Good morning. Today, as we continue our series on the letter of James, we're going to be exploring the topic of favouritism. We're going to be thinking about some real life examples, and James is a great letter for getting real. We're going to look at what God thinks about having favourites, and we're going to see why the way we treat people is really important. So let's think about what favouritism looks like in real life. I'm going to throw out a few examples, which I suspect most of us will be able to relate to. They might be your experiences, or those of someone else you know, and you'll probably be able to add further examples to this list. So to get us started, have you ever been considered to be your parents' favourite child? Or believed that you're not? If you're a parent, have you ever been asked by one sibling, don't you like him better than me, mum, or her better than me, mum? It might be expressed as a joke, but is there something going on behind what's being said? At school, maybe, did you find that you were the teacher's favourite, or perhaps the complete opposite? If you daydreamed or were too noisy, you probably thought that your teacher didn't like you. Alternatively, if you were quiet and well behaved, then you maybe have thought of as the teacher's pet and have had few friends as a consequence. These are just two examples, and we can see already with these two examples how harmful playing favourites can be. How favouring one person can put another person at a disadvantage, and how even being the favourite isn't necessarily a good thing either. Favouritism, however, isn't the same as having personal preferences or opinions. If you enjoy music, you probably have a favourite singer or artist. If you like reading, you probably have a favourite author. And if you're into football, you're probably passionate about a particular team. There are favourites to win a cup or a league or a race, although this will usually be based on perhaps ability or previous performance. On the internet, you can find any number of sites that rate, for example, the top 10 British beauty spots, or sites that will recommend which laptop you should buy depending on what you want it to do and how much you've got to spend, and comparative reviews, really, of any kind of product you can imagine. If you watch any TV shows such as MasterChef or Britain's Got Talent or Strictly Come Dancing, then your first impressions of those taking part will almost instantly sway your opinion as to who you want to be in the final. We'll all have our favourites, and these will be different because we're all different. The question, though, is, do we have favourites for the right reasons? When Bruce Forsyth used to present Strictly Come Dancing, he'd often say to couples who hadn't scored particularly well with the judges, after they'd had received their scores and were looking a bit glum, he'd whisper gently and go, "But you're my favourite." I'm sure it was his way of being encouraging and to remind the viewers that the scores weren't everything. But I'm not sure it was any more than that. It was a catchphrase. What James is saying to the readers of this letter, then and now, is to be discerning and not to judge on appearances. He gives an example from his own context of two men turning up for a church meeting. One is rich, expensively dressed, and the other is poor. And they get treated very differently. The rich man gets offered the best seat in the house, and the poor man is virtually ignored. Now, I don't think this story translates perfectly into 21st century church services. I wonder how many of us notice and indeed judge people we see based on what they look like and how they sound. You might think that's an awful thing to say to a bunch of Christians. But whether you call yourself a Christian or not, we live in a world that's influenced by and idolises celebrity, success, fashion and wealth, and it's difficult not to get caught up in that culture. Back in the day when I was a teenager, it was all about whether you had the right trainers or not. These days, the pressures of looking a certain way, especially for girls, is acute, and not conforming to your peer group is harder than ever. Discrimination on the basis of race, class and gender continues with devastating results. Showing favouritism like this, making judgments like this, is a far cry from having a preferred flavour of ice cream or holiday destination. And it's something, James tells us, that has no place in the church, quite simply because it offends God. It's a sin, he says, that's on a par with adultery and murder. Why does it offend God so much? Well, can you imagine God saying, I like Jane who sits 3 rows in front of you, much better than you. Or, I prefer Phil to you because he helps out every week with the children's work. No, we can't imagine that because that isn't what God is like. The New Testament says several times that God does not show favouritism. There are instances in the Bible, certainly, of individuals being described as favoured, but this, I think, refers to a particular blessing for a particular calling. God longs to bless, and he longs to bless everyone. His blessings and favour are for every single person. The Bible also tells us that the Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at outward appearances, but the Lord looks at the heart. Jesus told a story about 2 men going up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee, a respected religious leader, and the other was a tax collector, a person who in Jesus' day would have been despised because he worked for the enemy, the Romans. And Jesus said that the Pharisee went in and he told God how marvellous he was, all the things he'd been doing, whereas the tax collector simply said, Lord, have mercy. Jesus' comment, which ends the story, says that it was the tax collector who went home at peace with God. God didn't judge the 2 men by their appearance or profession or status, and he didn't automatically prefer the Pharisee because he had a religious job. God saw what was in their hearts. So what does all this mean for us on a day-to-day basis? Well, I don't think either Jesus or James was suggesting that we won't have preferences for certain things, or that we'll have the same level of relationship with everyone we know. It simply isn't possible. Even Jesus, when he was here on earth, had just 12 disciples, and of those, 3 were his particular friends. What James and Jesus are advocating is something else. It's a law found, in fact, in the Old Testament, and it says, love your neighbour as yourself. So if I think about how I like to be treated, and the kind of conversations I come away from feeling encouraged and built up, that gives me a good idea of how I might love people rather than showing favouritism. In conversations, it means being attentive rather than thinking about what I want to say next, or butting in, or being defensive, or simply speaking without thinking at all. It means giving space to another person so that they can express where they're coming from, and that becomes all the more important when that person is someone I disagree with. Loving my neighbour as myself also means letting go of comparison, which leaves me feeling either very superior or very inferior. Being jealous of someone else's talent or position, their latest gadget, even their shoes, just makes us bitter. There's a great picture in the Bible in a letter Paul wrote to a church in Corinth. It imagines the body parts arguing with each other about which of them is the most important. And part of the letter goes like this. The eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. And the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. God has placed the parts in the body, every one of them, just as he wanted them to be, so that there should be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. So instead of wishing we were like such and such with that particular gift because they do it so well, or that we had such and such a thing, we need to focus on our own role, what we've been called to do, and not waste time worrying about competing with anyone else. God sees what's on our hearts. He sees whether we want to serve him and to love other people as Jesus loved us. Final thought is that our emotions are often a clue to understanding whether we've mastered this loving your neighbour as yourself thing. If I'm upset, or if someone is upset with me, it's worth taking a moment to consider whether what was said or done came out of love, or whether it came from another source like pride, envy, or anger. If I criticise someone, for example, was that fair? Was it constructive? Could I have made the same point in a more helpful way? If I find myself thinking, I could have done a better job than that, what might the root cause of that thought be? We might want to pray daily and ask God to show us, just gently, where we might need to be changed. Or we might want to say sorry. In the Lord's Prayer, we ask God to forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. We cannot be more reconciled with God than we are with our neighbours. But showing love rather than favouritism amounts to much more than not just sinning. Loving my neighbour as myself isn't some kind of tick box exercise, a way of trying to please God in an earning brownie points sort of way. No, by loving Jesus and loving other people, we are in fact becoming a little bit more like Jesus. We're deepening our understanding of and our relationship with God. And through that, we get to build an authentic, loving community where everyone is welcome and everyone is valued. So, as James writes, my dear friends, don't let public opinion influence how you live out our glorious, Christ-originated faith. Be guided instead by Jesus, who came as a humble servant and whose love was so great that he died for us. How might we follow that example of service and welcome and love this week?